Good morning, friends. I'm Pastor Andrea. I'm the other one. So I'm so glad that you are spending your time with us this morning. We appreciate you wishing good morning and thanks and just talking to each other. It is great to see. So we're going to talk this morning, we're going to look at John and around chapter 10. And we're going to talk a little bit about the Good Shepherd. And the thing that I want to really for you to kind of pay attention to is they know his voice. They know his voice. So I'm going to read from chapter 10 of John. Very truly, I tell you, Pharisees, anyone who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate, but climbs in by some other way, is a thief and a robber. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he's brought out all his own, he goes on ahead of them, and his sheep follow him because they know his voice. But they'll never follow a stranger. In fact, they'll run away from him because they don't recognize a stranger's voice. Jesus used this figure of speech, but the Pharisees did not understand what he was telling them. Therefore, Jesus said again, very truly I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who have come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep have not listened to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. Then the wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. The man runs away because he is a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me. Just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that are not of this sheep pen. I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice. There shall be one flock and one shepherd. The reason my Father loves me is that I lay down my life only to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have authority to lay it down and authority to take it up again. This command I received from my Father. So we know that Jesus often told stories, he told parables, he shared analogies with those that he was talking to and teaching. Often, even today, we use analogies to help people understand what we're trying to get across. Now, today, we may not use an analogy as shepherd and sheep. Today, a more fitting analogy for us to try to explain someone who wants to take care of their flock. Maybe we would use an analogy such as a parent who takes care of their children, who would lay down their life to protect their child, who leads their children in the right way. Perhaps we would use an analogy of maybe a firefighter. Firefighters who run into buildings to save the people in their communities. They lay down their lives to help their community. So these are different analogies that we may use today, but for the time that Jesus was speaking, shepherd and sheep made sense. The people in that community would understand what he was trying to share with them. Now back then it says sheep were often gathered into a sheep pen to protect them from thieves, from weather or wild animals. Sheep pens in that era were constructed with sturdy walls and a single doorway. This allowed easy control over what animals got in or out, which people could access the sheep. The gatekeeper was not merely minding the opening. There were often no physical barriers across that opening, since gatekeepers were always on duty to rest or even to sleep. The gatekeeper would literally lay across the gap. The gatekeeper of the pen would ensure that only approved shepherds, those who had claim on a flock inside, could get in or out. Anyone trying to climb over the walls was, by definition, up to no good. Those allowed in by the gatekeeper were legitimately allowed to be there. Multiple flocks would be kept in a single pen. To get a particular flock out, all the shepherd had to do was call. The sheep, having been raised and cared for by that single person, would respond. Members of other flocks would not come in response to that voice. So, for example, I'm a city girl, so I don't know a whole lot about animals other than they're often cute as long as they're far away from me. I like dogs, that's about it. So, but imagine, if you would, that I have a flock of sheep, that Pastor Jody has a flock of sheep, that Dax has a flock of sheep, okay? And Tim is the gatekeeper, okay? So Tim, he's laying across that gap and he's making sure that all of those sheep are safe. Now, when Dax shows up to get his flock, all he needs to do is stand outside and call his sheep. Now, his sheep who know his voice will respond. My sheep, Jody's sheep, will stay in the pen because Dax is a stranger to them. And that's the kind of analogy, that's the analogy that Jesus was sharing with the people. Though the Pharisees weren't really understanding what he was talking about. He was trying to explain that he is the shepherd, that we are the they. We will know his voice. If you are a sheep and Jesus Christ is your shepherd, you will know his voice. He's using the analogy in response to religious leaders of Jerusalem who obstinately refused to recognize his miracles and his message. In plain terms, these men don't listen to his voice because they are not his flock. They are, as Jesus pointed out in other discussions, subjects of Satan. Pretty heavy stuff, I know, John does not mince words. He just lays it out, right? So if we look back at John chapter 8, verses 42, around there, I'm not going to read them all, but this is what he says to the Pharisees. He says to them, if God were your father, you would love me, for I have come here from God. I've not come on my own. God sent me. Why is my language not clear to you? because you are unable to hear what I have to say. You belong to your father, the devil, and you want to carry out your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning, not holding to the truth, for there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks his native language, for he is a liar and the father of lies. Yet because I tell the truth, you do not believe me. Can any of you prove me guilty of sin? If I am telling the truth, why don't you believe me? Whoever belongs to God hears what God says. The reason you did not hear is that you do not belong to God. So he's calling the Pharisees out, that they don't believe him and they don't understand what he is saying. They don't recognize his miracles because they are not his sheep. They do not know his voice. He repeats that he is the good shepherd. A main point of this analogy, which began in verse 10, is contrasting Jesus' spiritual leadership with that of others. He's especially criticizing the hypocritical and self-serving religious leaders who've betrayed Israel in the past. At worst, they're like robbers who cause mayhem in order to profit from the sheep. In other cases, they're like employees who abandon their duties when faced with personal risk. They're only concerned for the sheep when it's convenient and comfortable. Jesus also reiterates a point. Ancient shepherds spent considerable time with their flocks. From the moment of a lamb's birth, sheep were acutely tuned to the voice of their shepherd, and only theirs. Sheep would instinctively ignore or even flee from the voice of a stranger. Jesus' sheep, on the other hand, know his voice and respond to it. And as a good shepherd, he knows every detail about those for whom he cares. Now, if you're a parent and you've ever been in the delivery room, okay? Let's use the parent, the mom-child analogy. You've carried that child for 9 months. You've talked to them. You may have played music for them. They know your voice. It's amazing to watch that once they're born and you talk to them, they can turn, they will look for you, they will look for your voice because it's recognizable and they know who you are. Not everybody gets to have that moment, but I can assure you that it's an amazing one. I got the honor and the privilege to be in the room when my grandson was born, and just to watch that and watch him just go right to Hannah was just amazing. Even at moments after birth, he knew her. We know the voice of our shepherd. The problem is, do we listen for it? Now, I don't know about you guys, but I'm often overly busy. And what I mean by that is I don't know how to not be doing something, okay? So during these last couple of months, and like Jody said earlier, that is very odd to say that we've been doing this for a couple of months. But over the last couple of months, we've had to relearn how to be connected to each other. We've had to kind of relearn how to do this on Sunday mornings, how to stay connected to you guys. We've had to kind of relearn everything, it seems like. How do you go shopping? How do you greet people when you run into people at the store that you know and that you've been friends with forever? It's all different now. But also, we've had more time alone, at home, sticking close to home and those sorts of things. And so some people enjoy that relaxation. Maybe they're sitting home and they get a few hours in a day to kind of relax. Not you parents, because now you're teachers too, so sorry about that. But some of us whose kids are older, they don't have to step into that teacher role, so that's not too bad. And so I've been trying to figure out, do I just kind of relax? I don't really know how to do that. I found out in these last couple months. So what I did do was I redid our entire living room. I painted the walls. I redid the fireplace. Everything in the living room has been painted. The furniture's been rearranged. All of that fun stuff. Because I don't know how to relax. I'm not really sure what that means. So my mind is constantly moving. And before I got done with the living room, I had already moved on to other rooms in my house in my head, trying to figure out, that might be a pretty color in my bedroom. That'd be a nice color for the bathroom. What could we do in the kitchen? Let me think, right? So my mind is constantly moving on to the next thing. So in all of that busyness, when do I take the time to hear his voice? Right? Because life gets so busy. We're constantly moving on to the next thing before we finished the first. And I am absolutely one of those people. My mind is constantly going, I'm going to really just tell on myself. My mind is constantly moving so much that I have an app on my phone that's a puzzle app. And I use it at night before I go to bed. I know electronics before bedtime is a no-no. I apologize. Don't do it. I do it. All right, let's move on. But I have an app on my phone that's a puzzle app. And you can pick any picture, you can pick even how many puzzle pieces are in it, and it's a really cool app. So this is my dilemma at bedtime. So what I have to do to get my mind to settle down enough so that I can actually go to sleep is this. This is crazy. So I have to pick a puzzle that's hard enough that makes me focus on the picture and the pieces. But I have to set the number of puzzle pieces low enough that I can finish it before I actually fall asleep, because I can't leave an unfinished puzzle. Yes, that's the craziness that goes on in this brain. So that's the kind of brain that's constantly moving. Now, not always in the right direction and not always good thoughts, but it's constantly moving. So I have to be aware that there are times in the day when I have to figure out a way to sit and listen for his voice. Because if I don't make the time, I'll miss it. Because even though I know his voice and I can recognize it, often there's so much noise going on in my life and in my head that I'll miss his voice. Are you taking the time each day to listen to your shepherd's voice? There's another thing pitfall I think that we often fall into, is that sometimes we really don't want to hear from God. Because maybe we're doing things in our life that we know we're not supposed to do. We're making decisions we're not probably supposed to make. And so we're afraid that when we hear his voice, right, we're afraid of what he'll say or how he feels about us. We all have a tone, right? During Holy Week, I gave a sermon. I think it was Maudie Thursday. I can't really remember. But my niece in Maryland was listening to my sermon, right? Her son's 20 years old, and he's in another room. But at some point during my sermon, I used a tone. I'm not sure what the tone was. I'm not even sure I remember what the sermon I told. But he heard it in the other room, and he said, "Is that Aunt Andrea?" And she was, my niece Melissa was like, "Yeah, I'm listening to her sermon." And he goes, "Oh, I've heard that tone." And so she kind of chuckled, and I went on a few minutes, and he goes, "Oh, I've heard that tone. She's used that tone on me." And so they were giggling and stuff, but they but just goes to show that we can hear the tone. I'm 50 years old, and I know when my mom says my name a certain way, I've done something. I've done something that she doesn't like, right? And I think that we get it in our head that sometimes when we're doing things, what we're not really supposed to be doing, that when we do stop, when we do take the time to hear his voice, that there's going to be a tone. But there's not. Because it doesn't matter what you do or he's going to love you anyway. You need to take the time. You need to pause in your day. You need to take that moment and listen to the voice of your shepherd. Whatever you're doing, he forgives. You just have to take that time. Here's another cool thing. I think it's cool. He knows you by name. He knows you. He knows your name. He knows how many hairs are on your head. He knows your heart. He knows that whatever mistake you made today or yesterday or whatever, he knows in your heart that you are a loving, caring person. Just like a parent to a child. Just like a shepherd to sheep. There is grace and there is love in the voice of your shepherd. Listen for it.